Let's open our program with a communications prayer. Almighty God, our help and refuge, fountain of wisdom and tower of strength, who knows that I can do nothing without your guidance and help, assist me, I pray, and direct me to become a more effective communicator. Give me the insights, wisdom, and skills to always choose my words carefully, to respect another person's point of view, to recognize that I need to exhibit tact, diplomacy, and love. Grant me the ability to use my communication skills to help people, to impart knowledge, to open the eyes of those who choose not to see. Help me to accomplish whatever I may undertake, and to do it faithfully and diligently, according to your will. Amen. Let's begin by setting the stage for our discussion on communications. Most of us view communication as an instinctive skill or capability, something that we're pretty good at. We talk, we write, and we use body language to express ourselves, and then we assume, because we've done that, that we are being understood and we're communicating. However, the fact is that over half, 50% of our communication attempts are not heard or understood. This is a shocking reality. Let's look at a few communication quotes to help set the stage, to establish a perspective about communication in general. First, by George Bernard Shaw. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has actually taken place. Next, it is false to assume that if one can talk, he can communicate, because so much of our education misleads people into thinking that communication is easier than it actually is. The wonder is not that communicating is as difficult as it is, but that it occurs as much as it does. By Rule Howe, noted theologian and educator. And finally, a quote from Robert Frost. Half the world is composed of people who have something to say and can't, and the other half who have nothing to say and keep on saying it. That sort of sums up the thinking of a lot of people about communication, being that it's not all that we think it is. It's a good reason for us to dig into communication and learn how to do it effectively. Let's now review the learning points, the things that we're going to cover during this session. First, we'll define communication. Then we'll establish a goal for effective communication. Next, we will understand the communication process. Next, we'll discuss communication types, then levels of communication, and barriers to effective communication. Then we'll review several tips for effective communication. Then if we have time, we will do some exercises and then summarize. Let's define communication and communication skills. Communication is the process by which information is exchanged by words, symbols, signs, and body language. Communication skills represent the ability to communicate more effectively and competently by better understanding the communication process. So, communication is a process by which information is exchanged, and communication skills is our ability to learn how to communicate more effectively and competently. Now let's cover the goal of effective communication. It has two goals, actually. First, our ability to send clear and concise messages that can be more easily understood by the receiver of the message. And second, our ability to hear and correctly understand messages that are being sent to us. Let's get very fundamental and talk about the communication process. For communication to happen, you must have at least three things or components. First, you have to have a sender of a message. Secondly, you have to have a receiver of the message. And thirdly, there has to be an acknowledgement on the part of the receiver back to the sender that the message has been received and understood. Acknowledgement tends to be the missing link in communications. Let's now examine each requirement for an effective communication process with a little exercise. I would like for you to imagine two people sitting on the other side of a wall, as the illustration suggests. Neither one can see each other. The first person, or the sender, says, "Hello, are you there?" Is that communication? Yes or no? No, because the sender doesn't know if the message was received and understood by the receiver. Now, we're on the other side of the wall. The second person, the receiver, responds to the first message by saying, "Hello, I'm here." Is that communication? Yes or no? No, that is not communication, because the first person, the original sender of the message, has not acknowledged that the message from the second person, or the receiver, has actually been received. Now back to the first person. They hear the response and then they respond, "Glad you are there. Thanks." Is that communication? Yes or no? Where we sent a message in the beginning, the receiver acknowledges that they received the message and then responds to the original sender to make sure that they received the other message back. So is that communication? Yes or no? Yes, that is communication, because both the sender and the receiver of the messages have received and acknowledged the receipt and understanding of the message. So, communication is much like a tennis match. The ball goes back and forth across the net. If you if you lobbed a tennis ball over a net and you couldn't see your opponent, you get a better idea of what communication is like. The only way you're going to find out if the person has received the message is if they return a message back to you. Let's continue with the analogy of communication being like a game of tennis. The ball, which is communication, goes back and forth across the net. If the ball is returned, or the message returned, you are communicating. If it's not returned, you're only sending messages, not communicating. Therefore, communication is a back and forth process. It's an exchange. How many times do we send messages and assume that the other person has received and understood the message? Whether we're sending an email, leaving a voice message, or shouting out a verbal request. The key point is that until both parties acknowledge the back and forth process, there is no communication, only an exchange of words or signals. Now we're going to review the types of communication. There are basically three types. First is verbal, or what is said. Secondly, nonverbal communication, namely what our body says. And third, paraverbal, the way we go about saying something. Now let's take a look at each of the three types. Our first type of communication is verbal communication, namely the words that we use to express something that we want to communicate. Words tend to have different meanings based on several factors. First, the strength of our voice. There's a lot difference between a loud voice that says, "Hello out there," versus a soft voice that says, "Hello, how are you?" So, it's important to understand how the strength of our voice relates to communication. Secondly, the tone of our voice. And thirdly, the speed of our voice. Okay? Relative to the strength, a soft, smooth voice is comforting, like a mother singing a lullaby to her baby, whereas a loud, harsh, threatening voice is frightening. A motivating speech by a coach at halftime is an example. The tone of our voice can parlay or provide the receiver with either like a sense of urgency when you're alerting someone to danger, "Help! Help!" or a desire to get something, like a teenager begging with their father or mother to allow them to attend a party. "Oh, please, Mom, please." And lastly, the speed of our voice. A slow, deliberate style is used when you want to make a point in an argument, whereas a fast staccato style you use to get someone's attention. "Hello there, are you listening to me? Hello, are you listening to me?" So you can understand how verbal communication is impacted by words, and that words convey different meanings based upon the strength of our voice, the tone of our voice, and the speed of our voice. The second type of communication is nonverbal communication, as the quote from Professor Albert Mahabrian suggests. I quote, "The messages we send through our posture, gestures, facial expression, and spatial distance account for 55% of what is perceived and understood by others. Our body language is always communicating, whether we mean to or not. Nonverbal messages are the primary way we communicate emotions by using our face, our eyes, our body." Let's look at how the face comes into play with nonverbal communication. Our facial expressions The face is the most important nonverbal communications tool. It reveals our inner feelings, whether we're enthusiastic, we have high levels of energy, we seek approval, we're confused, bored, happy, sad, frustrated, anxious, or in a state of disbelief. Our face says it all, as the characters below indicate. There's a lot of difference between the feelings that we pick up from a happy, smiling face versus an angry face or a sort of an in-between face in the middle. So the face plays a vital role in communicating our feelings. Next, let's take a look at how our eyes come into play with nonverbal communication. Our eyes are particularly expressive in telegraphing joy, sadness, anger, confusion. Look at that picture. What do you see? How about this one? Look at the eyes. And this one, my goodness. And lastly, total anger or fear. So the eyes can be used as a tool to help communications and to convey our inner feelings. And lastly, let's take a look at how the body comes into play with nonverbal communications. Our posture, our gestures, how we present ourselves, how we stand, what we do with our hands, our arms, and our legs, all convey meaning. As the illustration here implies, when a person gets in your face like that, you know that they're angry, they're upset. Or when a person covers their eyes like that, you know they're depressed, there's something bothering them deeply. Or when you are wildly joyful about something, you want the world to know. So you give each other a high five, you throw up your hands and arms in great celebration. Or you're angry, you point a finger at somebody, you scowl at them. The body conveys meanings during communications. Let's talk some more about how our body communicates. First, our stance, how and where we stand. Next, our demeanor, how we present ourselves. And thirdly, our facial expressions, since the face tells it all. Relative to stance, when we have an open body, a smiling face, we're in effect telling the other person that we're happy, we're open to discussion, we're ready to talk. Whereas a closed body, with our arms folded, our legs crossed, a frown on our face, says to the other person, we're not very happy. This might be a very difficult conversation. Relative to demeanor, how we present ourselves, either we are happy, sad, expectant, angry, confused, excited, tired, or energetic. All of these have a different way of expressing themselves with our body. We tend to align our inner feelings, our demeanor, to match the occasion. If we're upbeat and happy, our body tells us that. If we're depressed or angry, our body tells that also. Not only do we feel it internally, but the other person that we're trying to communicate with senses that and picks it up basically from the way we present our body. And lastly, our facial expressions, since the face does tell it all. Our body instinctively causes the face to react to the situation that we're involved in. Again, whether we're happy or sad, our face will tell it. So if you try to present yourselves as being happy and you're not able to smile when you talk, then the other person knows you're not really happy at all. Therefore, our body does communicate, in some instances, more than words themselves. The third type of communication is paraverbal communication, or the way that we say something, the tone, the pitch, the pace of our voice. For instance, the phrase, "I didn't say you were stupid," has different meanings depending on which word is emphasized. For instance, "I didn't say you were stupid," or 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 "I didn't say you were stupid." All of the ways that we express ourselves with the tone and pitch convey a different meaning to the person who's receiving the message. Now let's review some barriers to effective communication. We can create communication barriers that impede effective communication. It's important that we understand what they are and how they operate. First of all, we have verbal barriers, our words and how we say those words. Then we have nonverbal, what our body says. And thirdly, the actions of our body. In other words, what is not said, but something which our body, our stance, our words imply. Let me explain what we mean by verbal barriers. First is what we call the attacking style. This is when we become very critical and we blame somebody from the get-go about something. For instance, we say, "If you were doing your job properly, we probably wouldn't be in this situation, would we?" You can see how this immediately puts a person on the defensive. Secondly is a condescending style, where we preach at somebody or we try to diagnose a problem. For instance, "You obviously don't realize that if you were following procedure, you wouldn't have created this problem." The third type of verbal barrier is when we show power by threatening or commanding somebody to someone simply because we think we are in charge. For instance, "If you don't stop screwing up, I'm going to write you up and put a copy in your personnel file." This does not result in very effective communication. And lastly, when we shout, name call, or make menacing gestures at people, we immediately put them on the defensive, and it's not going to be a pleasant conversation. Now, let's look at some examples of nonverbal barriers. For instance, flashing or rolling your eyes around while somebody is speaking, or your arms or legs are crossed, implying to the sender of a communication that you're not really open to discuss something. Gestures made with exasperation, you throw up your arms and walk away from somebody, or you pay no attention by slouching or hunching over. Or you use distractions like playing with a toothpick or a nail clipper, or doodling and playing with a pen or pencil. Or you're staring at someone, which is very difficult for the sender of a message to accept. Or you try to avoid eye contact altogether. Or you're checking your email or answering your phone during a conversation. Or you have excessive fidgeting, sniffing, or yawning, or scratching here and there. These are all examples of nonverbal barriers. Another really important barrier is what is not said. As Peter Drucker once said, the most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said. For instance, you're angry and someone's trying to speak with you and you say, "I'm fine, leave me alone." Well, you know that the person's not fine. Or a person sadly says, "Oh, I don't know." And they're trying to convey the fact that they're okay, but in fact they're not. Now let's cover some tips or ideas on how you can become a more effective communicator. First, give feedback to a person when you're talking about something based on facts, not opinions or raw emotion. Next, try to see things from the other person's point of view. Put yourself in their shoes on the other side of the desk by using empathy and your intuition. Next, learn to be a good listener. Literally pay attention while somebody is speaking so you're not thinking about how you're going to respond. You should listen before you ever respond. Next, don't preach or pontificate or try to moralize someone. You're not a cleric. Use a calm tone of voice. A calm tone of voice always works. Don't be sarcastic or condescending. Politely ask for something, don't command. These are some of the ideas. We'll cover some more. Here are some additional communication tips. Try not to dominate a conversation. Let the other person talk. Don't volunteer advice or opinions unless they ask for your advice or opinion. Try to get to the point. Avoid vagueness. Don't beat around the bush. Don't talk down or up to others. Remember, it's always you, not me. Next, when you're done, stop talking. Don't barge in and start talking. Somebody might be busy or they don't want to be distracted. It's always a good idea to start the conversation by saying, "Is this a good time to talk? Do you have a minute?" That gives the other person the opportunity to either let you start the conversation or they can say, "No, I'll get back to you in a minute or two." These are some communication tips that will help to improve your communication skills. Here's another tip for how to deal with delicate issues and discipline issues. When discussing a delicate issue or discipline problem, schedule a meeting in advance. Try to schedule it towards the end of the day so that the person will not be sitting at their desk all day long worrying about what was said. Give them an opportunity to think about it overnight. When you're dealing with these type of issues, uh, try not to communicate when a person is stressed out or emotional, hungry, tired, or angry, because they won't be listening. They're, they'll be concentrating or thinking about what's going on in their life at the moment. So that's one additional tip for you. The advancement of technology has ushered in a series of new contemporary communication issues, specifically the impact that technology has on contemporary communication and human interaction. We live in the new era of the smartphone and social media. Our youth and young adults are communicating in significantly different ways than prior generations. They are creating a new communications culture. There's a decline in human touch and interaction being replaced by technological touch and interaction. We need to stop for a minute and see how this new technological capability can help us improve in areas like teaching and learning. Many of the traditional teaching and learning models of the past are no longer effective, and they need to be replaced by technological approaches that are more appropriate for today's technology and learners. What does the future of communication hold? We'll talk about that in the next slide. Let's review the evolution of communication and then take a look into the future of communication. We have moved from the early inscriptions in caves by cavemen, through the invention of the printing press, through mass publications, into the technological age of email and Twitter, and now smartphones and social media. Technology has enabled a new communications culture with faster access and increased volume, but at the sacrifice of human interaction. The future will hopefully bring about a better alignment between communication technology and human and societal needs. We can expect more change, more sophisticated tools, faster speeds, continued expansion of social media, persistent security issues, the fusion of technology and the human body. The future represents an unlimited potential in terms of our ability to improve communication. Now let's do an exercise. The exercise is called Two Moose Sitting on a Log. I want you to listen to this story, then answer the questions, but don't blurt out the answer to anyone around you. Here we go. Two moose are sitting on a log talking about baseball. The little moose is the big moose's son, but the big moose is not the little moose's father. How is this possible? Think about it. The answer is the big moose is the little moose's mother. There's a communications lesson here about preconceptions tend to get in the way of obvious answers. We just assumed when we heard the story that there were two males involved because they were talking about baseball. We didn't think that it might be the little moose's mother that was sitting on the log talking about baseball. Let's do another exercise. This exercise is called Having Fun with O. Here's the way it works. I'd like you to use the word O with the different voice inflections to convey the following: shock, pleasure, doubt, anticipation, surprise, displeasure, questioning. For instance, when expressing shock, we say, "Oh," or pleasure, "Oh," or doubt, "Oh," or anticipation, "Oh," or surprise, "Oh," or displeasure, "Oh," or questioning, "Oh." You can see that each different inflection conveyed a totally different meaning. There's a communications lesson here too. Namely, the way we say something is as important as what we say.